Hi, I'm Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond. I'm a literacy specialist, and in this video, I'm going to share with you what the research says about teaching spelling, my personal perspective, and also some activities that you can use to work on spelling in first and second grade. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure to do that now, and then also hit that little bell so that you're notified every time I post a brand new video about teaching literacy in K2. Okay, so let's talk spelling. There are a lot of different ways to teach spelling, and I know for me personally, the way that I learned spelling was I don't know that I learned spelling this way, but this is how I was taught spelling. We had a weekly list in grade school, and I would bring it home. I remember my mom would practice with me, and then at the end of the week, we would have a test. And then we never revisit those words again. I think sometimes we would have maybe a little bit of review, but it was kind of like a weekly thing. And then we were done, and then we would move on. If that's the way that you were taught spelling, in the comments right now, just type the word me so I can see how many other teachers had this experience growing up, or maybe you even did this in your classroom, because this is pretty universal practice, right? It seems logical. Okay, if we want kids to learn spelling, then we give them words to practice, and then at the end of the week, we have a test. So it makes sense that we would think to teach spelling this way, or maybe we were taught spelling this way. So let's talk about that. First of all, I want to say that teaching spelling is a good thing. There are so many reasons to teach spelling. Number one, it makes writing easier, right? Because I know that there's word processors, but kids do need to learn to write by hand. There is some research that shows that writing by hand is really beneficial for learning, and that includes learning phonics. So it's going to help with writing, okay? It's also going to help with reading. And what's really interesting is that when kids are reading, they might learn a little bit about spelling, but when they're practicing spelling, it actually helps a ton with their reading and learning phonics patterns. So spelling is totally beneficial, and even though, as we're going to talk about, what I'm going to tell you is not to do that traditional spelling list practice, it is still important to teach. I'm going to go down a small rabbit hole right here. I want to talk briefly about invented spelling. This is not what we're talking about in this video. I'm talking more about explicit, structured spelling. However, as kids are writing, they're not going to be able to spell all words instantly, right? They don't start school and they can immediately spell all words. They're going to need to learn to use invented spelling, or basically what that means is just stretching out words or tapping them out and then writing the sounds they hear. It's their best guess spelling, and it's going to be incorrect, okay? That is okay. That also actually helps develop their phonics knowledge, so using invented spelling is a good thing. But what we're going to talk about here is explicit spelling instruction, because that is needed too. That's very important. So when we're teaching kids to spell words, what we want to do is we want to avoid activities that focus on rote memorization. That's exactly what that weekly traditional spelling list situation was. I was just expected to memorize these words and then spit them out again on the spelling test at the end of the week. What the research has shown to be more effective is that we need to group words, first of all, by phonics pattern, phonics skill. So if we're teaching the AR pattern, for example, we would be having our kids work on words like star and far and park, right? And we might have other words in there, like, for example, some short A words, so that kids can see the contrast between, here's short A and then here's AR. But we want to make sure that these words that we're working on with them are not just scattered, random, here, there, and everywhere. We want them to be focused around one or two specific phonics patterns or skills that we're teaching, okay? And the reason for this is that patterns provide our students with so much power. There are a zillion, I know I'm so specific, there are a zillion words in the English language. My point is just that there's a lot. And we can't possibly teach our kids to read and spell every single one. But the beautiful thing is that English, the majority of English words do follow patterns. And so when we teach our kids patterns, that empowers them to read and spell so many more words than if we were just teaching words individually. Having kids do a weekly spelling test is essentially teaching words individually, especially if those words are kind of random and they're not centered around specific phonics patterns. So of course, to be able to choose words for your kids to practice spelling with, you have to have a phonics scope and sequence. You have to be clear on what skills are taught when, and from there you can choose words to focus on. So I will include a link in the caption for this video so that you can grab my free phonics scope and sequence so that you have something to go on if your school does not provide it already. All right, so instead of having the spelling list, sending it home, and then maybe not even doing anything with those words throughout the week, or doing like just independent practice where the kids are working on their own, what you want to do instead is have guided activities where kids are working on spelling the words with that phonics pattern. So coming back to our example of AR, right, like in far and star and park, we first want to make sure that kids can segment words with AR. So for example, if it's the word spark, that they can say spark, spark, because they need to be able to segment in order to spell it. So they've segmented spark. Let's say that they have then built it with magnetic letters. I'm going to build it real quick here. And then there's so much that you can do actually after you have them build it, or even just write it on whiteboards. What I like to do is have them do something that I call tap it back. So after they've spelled the word, I have them tap it to check it. Spark, spark. And this way, I haven't told them how to spell the word correctly yet, but this way they can correct some mistakes. Additionally, after they've spelled the word and you've given them like, okay, this is how you spell it, and they've corrected it, you can ask them some questions like, okay, which letters make up the R controlled vowel in this word? And they can point to AR and tell you. You might say, which letter spells the sound K in this word? And they can say K, right? Where's the blend in this word? That's the S and P. Of course, you don't have time to go into that level of depth with every single word that they spell. But when you do this interactive, like guided spelling, instead of just having them practice on their own, like build words or whatever, then there's so many opportunities to build their phonics knowledge and make sure that they're really getting it, right? And not just memorizing a couple of words, but they're actually understanding how this phonics skill, in our case here, the AR, works, right? So there's so many opportunities when you provide this guided spelling practice. Another component of highly effective phonics instruction or spelling instruction too is that it's differentiated. So all kids are learning more or less their phonics skills in a certain order, but what varies is the pace at which they are learning these skills. So you might have kids that are indeed ready for AR, and then you might have some kids that are still working on mastering short vowels. That's absolutely normal. It's typical to have that variation in the classroom, okay? So when possible, and it might not be possible to do this every day, but when possible, provide differentiated spelling instruction. And this could be, well, maybe the whole class is working on AR if that's what you have to do, but maybe some kids are working on easier words like far, right? Spark is a little more challenging. It has more letters. There's a blend at the beginning. So you could give some kids easier words than others. But also, I mean, where this really is most effective is if you can work on spelling, at least sometimes in a small group setting where maybe not even all of the kids are working on AR. Again, some are working on like short A and some are working on AR. This can be a little bit challenging to pull off, I know, but it really has a big impact. So the more that you can work on phonics skills, and that includes spelling in a differentiated small group setting, the better. Because as kids are moving up what I like to call the phonics staircase, they're not going to be successful if you're up here on the staircase and their actual development is down here. That's not where optimal learning takes place. So the more you can meet them where they're at with spelling, the better. And that's one big difference between spelling instruction that I recommend versus like the spelling instruction that I got as a kid. Because when I was a kid, we all just got the same list and it wasn't differentiated at all. Right? So the more you can differentiate, the better. Again, I know it's hard because if you're a classroom teacher, you have so many students, but even if it's just like a couple of times a week in small group, you work on spelling at their level, that is a really good thing for them. Now you might be thinking, okay, Allison, well, that's great, but like, what about words that are irregularly spelled? Like the word would. That is not spelled like how it sounds, right? WOULD. It doesn't sound like that. It's surprising. What I call it has a surprising spelling pattern. Now, these words are also important for kids to learn how to spell. I typically include these just as part of my high frequency word instruction. And I have other videos on my YouTube channel that you can definitely check out. Just do a search for high frequency words to see what's available. But with these words, yes, they're spelled irregularly, but you still want to help kids focus on the sounds. And with the example of wood, you just need to help them understand that, yes, the W represents the W sound, and then the OUL is representing the sound, and then the D is representing the D sound in wood, right? So you need to help them understand, like, yes, it sounds different than it's spelled, but you still need to help them make those connections. So in some ways, it's very similar to how you would teach them to spell any word. It's just that those words will probably need a little more time and attention because they have those tricky parts. Not all high frequency words are regularly spelled, by the way. I'm just referring to those that have a surprising sound or a surprising sound pattern, or sometimes more than one surprising sound pattern. So again, I have other videos that show you my method for teaching high frequency words. So make sure to look in my YouTube channel after we finish up here so you can see exactly how I do this. I also talk about how to help them read these high frequency words as well. Okay, last thing I want to talk about is spiral review. Now, coming back to my example of traditional spelling, practice where you got the word list and then you memorize it and then you move on. Again, that's not effective. The research shows that kids need a lot of repetition and review to really solidify their ability to spell words. And sometimes, and you will have experienced this if you teach maybe first grade, when kids learn a new pattern, it can sometimes cause them to spell other words that they learned previously incorrectly. So they learn silent E and then all of a sudden they're spelling short vowel words with silent E too. They're overgeneralizing. So that happens, it's normal, but the way that we deal with this is to make sure that we spiral back and review words with skills that we've recently taught, or maybe that we've taught a long time ago, or that they learned in a previous grade if that's what they need to work on. So when you're choosing words to work on with your students, yes, include the words that for example, have AR in them because that's what you're working on in your phonics. But at the same time, you want to make sure to intentionally build in space for some words that you've worked on previously or that have patterns you've taught previously. This review is so essential to getting kids to actually master spelling. If you want to have a spelling program that also includes phonological awareness, phonics, decoding work, you've got to check out From Sounds to Spelling, our phonics program. And in this program, all the work is done for you. The words are chosen, the review words are included, the instructions on how to teach spelling, videos to help you understand how to teach phonics in general, including teaching spelling. They're all included in it. So I will include a link in the caption for this video about From Sounds to Spelling. You can also download a free trial on that page when you go there. So I hope that that's helpful to you, and definitely check out From Sounds to Spelling if you need a program like this, because teachers are so busy and you should not have to guess and kind of cobble things together. You should have a spelling program to follow that's research-based and really effective with students. So again, I hope this video was helpful. I appreciate you watching. Before you leave, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.